Welcome to the Malden Zone. My name is Ed Lucey, and I'm your host this evening for the next hour. I had a couple of suggestions and maybe on how you can make some money or find some money. So if you take the time to get a pencil and a piece of paper, I'm going to run a couple of ideas by you while we wait for our guest. The state recently had, as they do periodically, had their abandoned property auction. They used to do it at the State House, and you could go in and bid in person. In more recent years, what they've done is that they've done it online, and what it consists of, for the most part, are abandoned or unpaid safety deposit boxes that people have had in banks. It's also instances where companies have sent out checks that are due people, whether they be payroll checks, refund checks of various kinds. Could also be a dividend check or stock sales checks, anything of that nature that emanates from a third party. And when those checks either are not cashed or are returned to the firm that sent them out, they're responsible to the state after a period of time to give that money over to the Commonwealth. And eventually, after another extended period of time, the Commonwealth then has auctions. And the interesting thing, of course, when you get involved with safety deposit boxes, you end up with jewelry, you end up with other types of valuables that people put in there, including the coins. It could be stock certificates, could be any number of items. And those, again, are sold online now with the auction that the state had this past week. But just as a point of interest, and it's worthwhile for people to try and check this out, because sometimes it might be a relative of yours. It could be an aunt or a person who's in your family who had money in an account in a bank, or and if it's no activity on it for 3 years, that's considered an abandoned property. But unclaimed property pertains to any financial asset without customers' generated activity for an extended period of time. Now, again, as I mentioned, with banks and credit unions, generally it's 3 years. It does not pertain to land or real estate of any kind. Some examples of unclaimed property are savings and checking accounts, unpaid wages or commissions, uncashed insurance proceeds, stocks, underlying shares or uncashed dividends, customer deposits or overpayments, certificates of deposit, credit balances and refunds, money orders, life insurance policies, and that's a big item. That could take an hour about some things that are being done now to reach out to people to get them the monies that do them as beneficiaries on the life insurance policies that insurance companies retain holding the money for sometimes for far too long. Uncashed benefit checks, account payable checks. And in any event, the state Treasurer's Office oversees more than $2 billion in unclaimed assets of all kinds. If your forgotten assets end up in our hands, we urge you to claim them rightfully yours. And you get two options. If you're able to do it on a computer, what you can do is go on to www.findmassmoney, FINDMASSMONEY, that's one phrase, .com. www.findmassmoney.com, or if not, then you can call 800-1888-3 344-6277. And along with that, the state also, the Treasurer's Office also periodically publishes a list in an area of unclaimed funding available to people or assets that belong to people. And again, in most instances, it's these checks and bank accounts and interest payments and sometimes tax refunds. But that when they do that, that's done through the Treasurer's Office. And I'll get more onto that later on in the program. But in any event, if you check either through with the computer or get on and make the phone call, you can identify yourself, and they can tell you whether you might have something that's you're entitled, or you might look again, as I suggested earlier, have a family member who, particularly sometimes when people get older, they sometimes forget these things, and that's why those safety deposit boxes are often abandoned, because they think that either they've died, they've moved away, in some instances they forgot that they even had them. The family members may not be aware that the person that's a senior citizen or someone within the family circle has this source of personal papers or even values, and when it doesn't get paid, and if they've moved and the mail gets turned back, the bank can't find them, eventually that's where the abandoned property comes from. So that's one opportunity you'll have. Maybe you're finding out some, it's not exactly a scratch ticket worth $1 million, but sometimes there's been pretty substantial amounts of money available to people once they're able to track back these possible sources of assets. And I just came in, Michelle Luong.
Nice to see
Michelle Gucci Luong. And you know, a lot of people have an ambition to open a business, and sometimes they do it from the home, sometimes they do it part-time, and sometimes they make the plunge and they go to a site and they rent the property, usually rather than in a position to buy the property, and lo and behold, they open a business. But you deal with a lot of things that are beyond just the trepidation of starting a business. Number one is you have to have an occupancy permit from the community where your business is located. If you're not incorporated, you often have to get a business certificate from the community where you're located. If you're going to have credit cards accepted, you have to make arrangements with, and that's expensive too, because every time you charge, there's a fee assessed to the merchant who accepts your credit card, and therefore they have to factor that in as a cost of doing business separate from the heat and the lights and the rent. And but the real America's made up of small businesses, but obviously when the government says small business, they're talking about 250 people or less. We're talking about Michelle, who opened a new business in November, I think it was.
Yes, November 16th.
By herself, not meaning she didn't have a lot of help in the family, but she runs it and manages it herself. And it's located in Maplewood Square on Maplewood Street. And why don't you give us a little background on how you came about coming in to that location and how you started about the business?
Yes, well, my husband and I started actually doing an engraving business back in 2004, and we basically do a lot of commercial and industrial engraving. And what we started to notice is that as you know, other small businesses, you get known on the internet, and we started to have people wanting, you know, 1 and 2 things done, and not so much 1 or 200, you know, a couple hundred. So we decided, you know, it was time to open up a storefront, a showroom for the everyday person. So as we started to really research all the stuff that was out there, and it was, you know, knowing our neighborhood, I've grown up here, I've born in Malden, grown up here, I raised my family here, I'm a realtor here, so for me, Malden was just a natural choice. So just knowing my market and knowing, you know, what it would take to open up a business here really kind of was very helpful. So we chose Maplewood Square for a number of reasons. The history behind Maplewood Square, it's always just been a walking square. People, you know, it's very busy. The people there have just been amazing to us. And so this is here, I brought an example of what we do. We have a lot of fine gifts as well as, you know, stuff that we engrave. And we also engrave things that people didn't buy in our store. So we've actually had a lot of that the last couple of weeks. Just someone bought something at another retailer and just came in and said, I'd like it engraved, and absolutely will engrave it.
We were trying a little bit before the show started with the people here at the studio, and years ago, as I mentioned to them, I used to buy from Bombay up there at Square One Mall.
Yeah.
And you'd go down the hall to another location. There was things to remember, and they would engrave if you wanted an item that you had purchased that was like a memory box, which was a popular item at that time, and I would often buy from Bombay. And the result was, because you were in the mall buying from a merchant, going to another merchant to do the engraving, it was relatively inexpensive. But since Bombay's gone out of business out of the mall, what I've heard back from people is that when you go to that same site, things to remember, not that I'm criticizing, but I'm just saying, apparently they had a two-tier price system. If you bought from Bombay, they charge you one engraving cost. If you went and outside brought something in, there was a different price. And now apparently if you buy from them, it's one price, and if you don't, they charge a separate price.
Right. Well, they also have a different price structure than we do. You know, I don't like to put down the competition by any means, but
let's do it.
But I will. No, what they also do is that when people when they want things engraved, they actually have what's called premium fonts, the lettering, and your everyday fonts. So this is one price that they advertise, and then these are the premium ones. At Perfectly Gifted, we use only premium fonts. So we don't really, if we have a font in our listings, we probably have, 20 or 30 different ones. I don't tier them according to the best ones are this cost and whatnot. You come in, I have a book ready for you to look at, and you choose which one you'd like.
Now these items you brought with you this evening, these are the type of things you have.
Yes, they're so exciting.
Yeah.
This is a cake server. It's actually very cute. And you can actually engrave the tip. I don't know if you guys can see that, but you can engrave the tip of it. And this is actually one of my favorites. These have actually been our big sellers for the season so far, the last 3 weeks for me. And these are our wine bottle holder, which is actually a shoe, a high-heeled shoe, which is wonderful. And then what we also do is we actually engrave the wine bottle itself full. So this is a full bottle of unopened wine, and we actually engrave it.
So if you're gonna, if someone were going to give a gift of wine, you'd have engraved.
Right, absolutely.
I see. Okay.
We can't sell the wine because we don't have a liquor license, but we can, however, you can bring it in, we can engrave it, and we then give it back to you.
Okay. Yeah.
And here's another example. So here's another wine bottle holder we have, the bustier. And this is another example of our wine bottle, all etched. We have it etched on the side and on the top. And then this here is actually, this is a really fun gift that we sell. It's actually a candle. And what it is, it's actually a local merchant. Her name is Annette, and they're called Candlelicious Occasions. And she came into my store. I was actually using a different supplier out in Westfield, Mass. But she came in and showed me what she had. And since I'm also a local merchant, I want to, also promote other local merchants. We're now carrying her bears instead. And what they are, they're a full soy, they're a plush stuffed animal that's hand dipped into pure soy wax, candle wax, and then scented. This one in particular it's Macintosh apple. So, obviously our viewing audience can't smell it, but it smells wonderful. And it smells good. See, smell it. Yeah, it smells good. And what you do is they actually you unwrap it, you take the bear out, you sit it on a bureau or on a stand, and it actually smells the air in the area of a room for up to 2 months. And there's no reason, you don't burn them, you don't burn the bear, there's no burning them. So this actually works really well. My nephew was really funny, he worked for me last weekend, and he was telling all his friends about it, because I guess in college you're not allowed to have open flamed candles.
Makes sense.
Which absolutely makes sense. So he's actually been promoting it online at Facebook for dorm rooms. So they're actually a nice gift. And this is one of our last things. These are actually made from an artist in Plum Island, and they're coasters, but they're made completely out of cement. And the gentleman's name is Jordan, and his company is Culinarium. So we're carrying all of his products. And this is actually longitude and latitude. So you can come into the store, and you can give us your exact address, and we will come back and etch a set of coasters with longitude and latitude of your exact address, where you are in the world.
Now, when you say he's Irish, is he an island or is he just Irish?
Oh, no, he's not Irish. He's from Plum Island.
Oh, Plum Island.
Plum Island. No, not Ireland. Plum Island.
Plum Island.
And so then the last thing we actually have, we have a lot of stainless steel and a lot of fine gifts. And on the back here, this is one customer that came in, and she had her husband's name and their 3 children engraved. This is just an example of our keychains. So we have, you know, everything from keychains to children's gifts to stools that you can have etched on the top. And then we have a number of items you don't necessarily have to have etched. You can just, you know, buy them as is, and, you know, they're just fine gifts. So.
Did you find once you started to put the idea together, and that there was some surprises as far as the complications that you didn't anticipate when you were opening your business? You know, you try to think of everything, and invariably the things come up that you don't.
Yeah, you know, it was really funny. And I realized we had incorporated our business because the other side of our business was already incorporated. So I knew I didn't need a business certificate, but it was the occupancy certificate that kind of threw me for a bit. That was not a problem, but it was the sign. It was, you know, getting the permits for the sign weren't included in the occupancy. So for me, it was just, you know, it was a very easy process once we got started, but it was a process nonetheless.
Yeah.
But it was easier for us just because I just went by the rules. You know, they laid it out. My landlord was real specific. This is what your sign has to look like, and did it, and we went right through the process pretty easy. So.
Yeah. The foot traffic, has that been picking up now that you've had a few weeks chance to
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It has. Word of mouth's been starting to spread. We've had some, you know, like I said, the community's just been wonderful. The local businesses have been great. They've been sending their customers over. From the guy, you know, from Maplewood Meat Market to Vanessa's 2 doors down, and to the USA Dry Cleaner next to me, and, you know, my own realtor shop, Remax Trinity, where I work.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all the local businesses in Maplewood Square have all been sending, you know, people on over and welcoming, you know, my husband and I to the area, which has been wonderful.
And what are your store hours, and what days?
We're closed on Monday, but we're open Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday till 5, and we're open on Thursday and Friday till 7. And Sundays till 3.
And you open at what time in the morning?
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock, okay.
Yep.
Yeah. And you're, just for the people that may not be totally familiar with the area, you're on Maplewood Street.
Yes. I'm directly across from Maplewood Meat Market.
And it formerly was housed the
Star Upholstery. Yes.
Okay, so that may be zero in for some people.
Yes.
And now that parking lot that's next to Maplewood Meat Market, is that open to the public to park there?
If you go into the parking lot, depending on, you know, you go into the parking lot, to the right, there's metered parking. There are 2-hour limits. To the left is permit parking. So the answer, to the right is public parking.
There is. Okay.
Yes, but it's all by meter.
Yeah, and so if there's nothing on the street. Have you had any unusual requests so far that you can think of that you hadn't anticipated, which you couldn't fulfill, or you did fulfill?
You know, I did. I actually had somebody come in and ask me. I have a series of a lot of men's gifts, but I didn't anticipate was that somebody asked me for cigar boxes.
Wooden ones or metal ones?
They wanted wood ones.
Oh.
All wood ones, which I didn't have. And then the other request was for ice buckets, glass ice buckets.
Okay, yeah.
Which I said, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that one either. So.
I saw her when I was in the shop one day. You have what looks like a dog.
Oh, dog! We have a series of pet gifts. We have dog bowls that you can have stainless steel that you can have personalized with your dog's name on them. But we also have pet charms that are very cute. And there's a series of charms that we have, and you can put them on your little pet's collar. And then we also have a different set that actually has, the dog has I love my human, and the owner has I love my dog for a keychain. So those are, you know, some of our sets that we have.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot better than the bumper sticker I saw not long ago on someone's car, was that my dog is smarter than your student of the month. The hours that would they be available by if by appointment sometimes if they weren't able to accommodate your
yes,
schedule.
give us a call. Absolutely.
And your phone number?
Is, you're going to make me do the 781-985-4438.
One more time now, slow.
781-985-4438.
Okay, and well, and you're satisfied? You're happy going along so far, and the results?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You know, we were really thrilled. We were a little nervous to be opening up. Yeah. You know, a couple weeks before Christmas. It was kind of like a, you know, big thing for us, but it was a good time. You know, people have been curious to come in, and you know what? We've heard the same thing from everybody. You know, our stuff is different. You can't go to the mall necessarily and see a lot of our stuff, and it's also local. And they were thrilled to be able to come in, buy a gift, and be able to leave.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and you know, there are still, in this day and age, in spite of all the mobility of society, that there are people either don't drive on highways, don't
Yep.
go that far, or they rely on buses and their feet to get to where they want to go. So if you
Absolutely.
live close enough to Maplewood and you're not really a person that drives a car, then you can either get a bus or you can walk. And if you do drive, you might rather be there than try and drive on the highway to get to a mall. And the other part of it is that sometimes in the mall you're not quite sure where to find what you're looking for, even though you know it's
Absolutely.
there somewhere. You know, and so. Well, that's very good and very delightful, and I
Great.
wish you a lot of success.
Thank
and
you very much.
as a further disclosure, Michelle is Carol Madden's niece,
Oh.
which should double the business before the week is out.
Oh, you're very sweet. Thank you.
And if you have any question, you can call 781-397-8286, which is our number here, or if you're not able to get down there or you have a question that you want to get answered before you get down to the location on Maplewood Street, the phone number is?
781-985-4438.
Great. Well,
Or you can also find us on Facebook, Perfectly Gifted.
okay, and though for those that don't use the Facebook, they can go down
Yes,
there and they get their
absolutely.
meet at one location, get their clothes clean next to you.
Yep, and come buy a gift.
And then come and get a gift. Well, great.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks for stopping
Thank
by.
you very much. I
and
appreciate it.
Lots of luck.
Thanks for
and
having
I'm sure
me.
you'll be successful.
Wonderful.
My pleasure. Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. I was talking a little bit about earlier about abandoned property, but there's kind of another subject I think is a little bit interesting that I would dwell on a little bit, which is in the next half a century, many fixtures of everyday life will go the way of the gramophone, labeled quaint and relegated to museums, if not the trash. In 50 years, will be futuristic predict will make America wax nostalgia. Here are some of the things that are going to change. Mail. Now, in one time you could mail a letter for 2 cents, and now it's 45, going up to a higher amount after the first of the year, or sometime near after the first of the year. And neither rain nor snow can keep letter carriers today away, but revenue will dry up for the U.S. Postal Service, and we continue to trend towards electronic correspondence to survive. The agency will have to scale back mail service, sending its fleet of truck carriers to join the Pony Express in mail delivery legend. Home phones. As these 20th century icons gather dust, people will drop the landline plans and opt for cell only. Eventually we'll be talking on mini computer the size of cell phones, and basic telephones will go the way of the doo-doo. I think I had mentioned on an earlier show that the number of people who no longer have landline phones to access this communication efforts, about 30%. And that's the reason why I had a little difficulty figuring out how when they were doing all those pollings for the election, how you could really be accurate, because there were so many people, particularly young people, don't use those sorts of phones any longer, in which case when you do polling, it was a little difficult to get the cross-section of people you need. Someone told me this past week that one of the advantages, and this was talking about organizational strategy, is that the Democrats aggressively hired the staffing required to focus in and obtain cell phone numbers and poll those people, where the Republicans apparently didn't. This is at the national level, and that they just did the types of phoning that you have when you check for not only preference for politics, but other types of market survey efforts, which was to call people on their home phone. Well, if 30% of the people don't have landline phones, that means you're missing a huge segment of the population who may not reflect that middle-class, white, vanishing American that is more likely to be vote Republican than the people that actually went to the polls in November and did vote. But gasoline pumps are going to be disappearing. When your car drives itself to a service station, it'll be to plug in a battery recharge to fill up with hydrogen. Can't say we'll miss the pumps or the fumes, the splashing or the pollution, but we'll still have the price, I'm sure. Business cards are going to disappear. Toilet paper. Toilet seat will wash and dry at the touch of a button, eliminating paper waste, greatly improving sanitation and adding a splash to today's daily routine. Road maps. glove box road maps, and no need for those when map apps offer direction, traffic, info, drive time estimates, and an arrow to the nearest Starbucks. Language barriers. Portable translation software will let us shoot the breeze with anyone with both parties speaking their native language. That's amazing. So the other day, the electronic age is upon us, of course, because the other day someone wanted to check something and he didn't have the access to the information. He just talked into his iPod or whatever it was, iPalm, and he got the answer back verbally, which is quite a feat for those people that are always inquisitive enough to keep checking for things to find out the answers to them right away. By the year 2020, and there's some effort even in Washington now, by the year 2020, only 10% of all monetary transactions will be in cash. Governments will likely support this trend. Some 25% of the world's circulating cash is issued for illegal activities. Electronic payment systems will replace our beloved coins and greenback. Well, how about passwords? Instead of having to remember and regularly update a combination of letters and numbers, your device will remember you. Facial biometric software will enable you to simply look at your cell phone or tablet and unlock it. Amazing. Cursive, and this is something that's I'm not so sure it's really a plus, but Hawaii, Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio have officially dropped handwriting as an educational requirement, with many states currently considering doing the same. One day, extra instruction may be required for students who wish to read historical documents in their original draft. Interesting enough, there's a city in the Midwest that was written up the other day in the newspaper that has a lower than average unemployment versus what the national level is. There are 14,000 jobs in that metropolitan area with jobs available, and these are more than service jobs or unskilled labor. And they've gone unfilled for a number of reasons, one of which is that some businesses have decided for the cost of educating or training people, it's better to either not increase your business, or that rather than train them and spend the money and be disappointed because they're not capable or qualified, that they end up leaving the job vacant. And in other cases, they've done surveys, and sometimes people feel that with unemployment and other social service supports out there, it makes more sense not to work if you can get what appears to be enough money to get by on without putting in 40 hours of labor for some employment company. So in any event, it's just an example of sometimes jobs are there, but you haven't got the people. And and one of the criticisms the businesses have mentioned in this area is that people, when they make out their application and fulfill the requirements for a so-called resume or their background, that they think they're on their texting messages to their friends because they abbreviate, they don't write out the words, they just shortcut all the verbiage that's normally expected in the end, and then they put a happy face logo on the resume when they turn it in, and that might be okay if you're texting a message to a friend, but it's not what maybe a business is looking for prospective employees. So anyway, the jobs are there sometimes, and maybe the difficulty isn't that there isn't any work, it's that you can't find a person that's qualified enough for the job. So that's one of the things. I had mentioned a little bit earlier, and I don't know whether the jury has come to a verdict on the former state treasurer, Tim Cahill, but that the criticism or the complaint legally against him was that he utilized the advertising budget of or he planned to enhance his campaign that was failing in his efforts to run it for governor as an independent or as a non-party or designated candidate in the last governor's election. And because of the complications that occurred from the result of promoting his candidacy while being supposedly doing official duties as a state treasurer, it ended up that in some ways he violated the law, in which case that's part of the criminal indictment. But the state, as I mentioned when the show opened, on the abandoned property had routinely over the years under this signature and the logo of the state treasurer's office, printed these listed metropolitan newspapers across the state, listing the names of people who have money or valuables or assets of some sort available to them that are in this category of abandoned property. And obviously, whoever the treasurer at that time to put that to use did it for his own benefit to get his name before the voters. And invariably, there was always a list that came out in the fall just before that election. So I don't know how much difference was between doing that and with Tim Kail, although the difference is in those days you could go ahead and do it by some sort of a contract arrangement with the newspapers. In this day and age, what's happening is people are emailing and putting in writing things that they're doing that sometimes at a later date don't look quite as reasonable or acceptable as they would if they had been verbalizing it instead of putting it in writing. So, in any event, one of the people that was indicted with him is an aide has been cut loose from the trial, so it's only Tim Kail himself. And of course, aside from losing the election, giving up his position as state treasurer, should he be convicted of a felon, and then he's also would lose his pension, which is obviously significant. So, anyway, he's in a situation that maybe he's got some hope for an early Christmas gift if one of the people that was being charged was found not guilty. Then it's very likely that he's hoping with this extensive deliberation on the part of the jury that the same thing will happen to him. And along with that, speaking of the state treasurer, within the last couple of days, there's been some conversations out there whether they said whether the trial balloons or otherwise that state's going to consider having gambling online, where you could do it with credit cards and when you could do it without personally being at a location to purchase a scratch ticket or to buy a lottery ticket or another type of gambling that's allowed here in Massachusetts, play Keno. And this would and this may be consistent with what is coming up with the casinos, but I hope that that not only will it get well vented before they even consider that, but it's the type of thing that really works against the best interests of the public, because sometimes the ones that are most susceptible to gambling are those people that are least able to do it, in that once you start gambling with credit cards as opposed to cash, you tend to maybe gamble more frequently, and you maybe do it to a greater extent than you would do otherwise if you had to do it with your money in hand. And beyond any of that is that it'll sometimes put people in a tempting position that they will end up creating tremendous amount of financial distress and difficulty within their own family by getting too involved in the gambling, where it'll be so easy. It literally would be a 24-hour-a-day opportunity, and it would work against a lot of people who historically we've found when casinos come into an area, even though the revenue generated, which is obviously what the state's looking for, and they try to get it any way that they can, and this is one way that is an option being considered apparently. It really doesn't work out in the long run for the public interest, and it certainly is going to be a disaster for some people who maybe who are weak or they have some difficulty in their life, or the compulsive gamblers, and it's a disease in its own way, and we've seen any number of cases all the time of people who whether because of casino gambling or offshore off-track betting or that sort of thing, have got themselves into difficulty financially, and it's caused tremendous difficulty in their own life and in other people who are part of their family circle. So I hope it doesn't happen, and I hope the people out there that are listening to the show, when they come across their state representative or their state senator, if they agree with that position, make their opinion known to those people who ultimately, if it's presented as a bill, will have a chance to vote on it. And again, I think it's not good working for the public interest, and the state should find some other way to raise money, which they already have, because starting next year, Amazon is going to have to collect the sales tax in this state as they've been doing in some other states, and that will give the people of Massachusetts an opportunity to continue to activate an Amazon purchase, but it will also result in a sales tax of 6+% being given to the state, the same as that people would now have to pay if they went into a retail or in a business located within this Commonwealth. So anyway, that's my ideas and thoughts on that. I'd like at this time to take a minute to congratulate Debbie Fallon and George Ramos, who Debbie's a former city councilor and was a candidate for mayor in the last election. Wasn't successful, but not being elected mayor in some fashion, she did get something positive come out of it, because she and George kind of met along the way, and they were married this past week. George is a president of the Firefighters Union here in Malden, and of course a firefighter, and Debbie, of course, has been an executive director of the Portal to Hope, a program been in existence for a number of years, and been working with bad situations with women particularly, and in any event, they were married this past week, so congratulations and best of luck. There was also another a nice event this afternoon. There was a ribbon cutting ceremony at 1 Salem Street, which is the site been selected for the teen center, which is officially going to open a little bit later this month. And those of you that attended the parade, that was a holiday parade here in Malden after Thanksgiving, the parade ended at the corner of Salem and Ferry, and the teen center was open for people to have an opportunity to get a sandwich and a cup of coffee and walk through it. And they had the official ribbon cutting ceremony today. I wasn't able to attend, but one of the driving force really of the program was Greg Lucey, who was a councilor at large, who happens to be related to me, but I'm not mentioning it because of that reason. But he and his wife and as well as other people have been very much involved. Dana Brown from the high school, and other people, without trying to name them all. I'm sure I'd missed one or two or three, but in any event, what has happened is the team was ribbon cutting ceremony was this afternoon. It'll be in full operation before the end of the month, and it's been a situation where it'll give high school students and young people a chance to drop by. There's computers there. There's going to be a lot of other activities that are put in place, and it's going to be a wide variety of choices regardless of your personal preference, whether you're a studious or a socializing person. You'll have a lot of options, and it'd be those of you of the age that are eligible, take the time to go by, and it's open to all of the young people of that age, whether they go to the Malden High School or to the charter school or to Pope John or to Malden Catholic, and maybe the residents of the school to go even to other locations. It's going to be open in the afternoon to the early evening, and is a great achievement, and been put together with a lot of help and a lot of financial support from very wide variety of sources. So congratulations to and good luck to the teen center. The one thing that bring up maybe the Field of Dreams. That's the ballpark that has supposedly been designated where the National Grid is, and it's going to affect some businesses in that area if the thing, and it's plowing ahead. There's been some people, myself included, that have some reservations about the potential to the business, because it seems that there were a lot of things that were involved to put it all together, one of which, of course, is to not only you have to get a field, and you have to get a location, and you have to get the money, and on and on and on, but then you have to get an affiliation with a league, and that means you have to get ballparks and players, and you have to, in the meantime, compete with there's a team in Lowell, there's a team in Lynn, a team in Brockton. Some of them have done better than others. Some of them haven't done. The independent league teams don't do as well as the ones that are affiliated with, like Lowell Spinners or the Pawtucket Red Sox. They have a marketing approach that, in addition to getting in Lowell, you get the new promising players, and in Pawtucket, you get sometimes seasoned veterans who have had some experience in the big leagues, and some other people on the way up, and you also get, of course, people that are rehabbing and they go down to Lowell, but they more likely go to Pawtucket even for the Red Sox, because that's their farm team affiliate, and so you can go to a game in Rhode Island and you see some instances Major League stars who were there for 5 or 10 days, or maybe a pitcher 2 or 3 games to get back into the flow and come back up to the Red Sox. So in any event, the agreement has been signed between the Field of Dreams people and the National Grid, and now the next step would be to put together the total package, which would mean to take over the businesses as well as to do all the other things. And again, it seems to be moving along. The question is it going to work? Well, time will tell that, but it certainly seems to be more viable now than a year ago, and a year ago was more viable than it was 2 years ago. But at the same time, there's a few other things that have to go between now and the field. But the target date, I think, is no later than the year 2014 to have a team on the field. Well, time will tell, and I'm not sure again that's going to work. But we'll. There certainly seems to be a little further along than it was before. In line with that, we had the chance because of the hype given. We watched the Patriots the other night, and they were certainly impressive. And Tom Brady was outstanding, and a team that only had lost 1 game and had won 6 in a row. This is a Houston team. It came into Foxborough and literally were demolished. Sometimes the sporting events are a game of whether it's football or hockey or basketball, less likely baseball, but where there's a lot of movement with people, momentum impacts the games. There were a couple of plays that occurred earlier that went the Patriots' way, but they dominated the game for the most part. And certainly, I think anybody from outside the Boston area that watched Patriots would see them as a contender in the final round, which is to go towards the Super Bowl. If you'd asked me when the season started about my prediction, I thought there was enough weaknesses with their backfield defensively that they will look better on paper than they really are in terms of an overall team. But maybe the difference is Tom Brady. They've got a high offensive machine, and their defense looked pretty good the other night. We'll see how that progresses as the season goes along. I wish them the best. I'm not quite sure they're as good as they looked the other night, but I've been wrong before. We'll see again. But the Red Sox seem to be this year to plan like a delayed year because they're not going into the market for those stars supposedly that are available. They're not looking to apparently spend the kind of money that they've spent in the past on some of the people that have been a disappointment. And you don't have to look any further than the blockbuster trade they made this past summer in the middle of the season when the people that whether Gonzalez or Crawford or whomever, Beckett, they all did the camp for Los Angeles, and they unloaded a huge payroll in some on an average of about $50 million a year. Based on what we've seen so far, it doesn't look like they're planning to replace those players with as much money to spend on the new guys as they saved by unloading those players. And now I don't know the details, but there seems to be even a glitch on the Napoli signing, and maybe have to do with his physical. And I thought the second choice that they paid the outfielder was worth the money based on what's being paid out there today. I didn't think the Napoli was worth that kind of money for a 3-year contract for someone who apparently got some qualities, but has been mostly a part-time player with an indefinite position to play, whether it be first base or catcher or a designated hitter. So anyway, he may not be coming at this point if there's some problems with the contract. But in any event, I don't think you'll find that the Red Sox, particularly where the new manager has left the team, this Toronto, who signed a bunch of people, making them a much better team than they were last year. And their weakness last year appeared to be a couple of injuries plus some pitching needs, and I think they've fulfilled that this year. So they may be have improved, and the Yankees seem to have improved again, and the Red Sox aren't even replacing those people that they lost. So I'm not so sure it's going to be a great year. Someone just was talking this morning on one of the sports shows and said that a close friend of his said to decided not to renew his tickets. And when it's a business, but when you consider that it costs about $23,000 a year, and if you're going to see an average team, then maybe you decide, well, those tickets really aren't worth it, because sometimes, and I can remember at a time when people had season tickets years ago, they had a hard time getting rid of them. So they may be in the same situation as this year, and I'm not sure if that's going to work that way. There's some controversy in Revere, and I don't know whether much of it spilled over. I saw an article out in the Globe, and I've also heard from a couple of people in Revere, but as you all remember, several years ago when they refurbished the church on the corner of Washington Street, and the senior center, which is, although I thought at the time they should have left it as a building, as a church, they decided ultimately to buy it from the church and end up turning it into a senior center. I thought it had some disadvantages, parking being one, and accessibility to people in some ways. But anyway, having done that, it ended up, it eventually was restored to utilized for what it is being used by the city. But it was named after Ed Markey, the congressman's mother and father. It was kind of an odd choice in a sense that although a great family and very successful sons, and they did have Malden roots, they really didn't have a history within the community of the kind of thing, normally in a situation like this, some public official or maybe someone that's dedicated years to the senior citizens, or maybe had been someone in the community who had had a long history of community activism. But anyway, it ended up that the senior center was named for his mother and father. And the reason, obviously, is because he's a congressman, and he had friends in high places, and they decided to acquiesce to his request. And it was great for him, and it was great for his family. And having said all of that, it's still going to function with what's in the name, whether it's a rose or whatever. But Revere has a little bit of a different take. They've just spent a huge amount of money to create a crossover, which is supposedly a mini Zakin Bridge from the Wonderland Station to what I hope maybe will be a casino in Revere, the Wonderland track. And it ended up, interesting enough, it's also named for the congressman's mother and father. And from what has happened there is that there's been some people within the community who have felt it should have been named after someone locally that had more identity with Revere, and the rationale apparently was that it cost about $20 million to put this package together to do the bridge, and that the congressman was most effective in by virtue of his position in the Congress, and then maybe the fact that there's a Democratic president, that to find the money to do was accomplished, and so the request from him apparently, or presumably, was to name it after his mother and father, which has been done. That's more of a reach. I'm not so sure that that's something that would fly too much in this day and age. And again, I think it's something that suggests that knowing the people in high places sometimes makes a difference. But I'm not so sure that with all the people in Revere who perhaps could have qualified to have it named after them in recognition of their service to the community, or for their efforts in some fashion, whether it could have been a veteran of some war or whatever. It ended up that it's going to be named after Ed Markey's mother and father, which is a decision that was made, but I don't think everybody down in Revere would agree with that. So that's my story on that, my take on that. And I have one other kind of thing that's becoming, I mentioned earlier about the difficulty sometimes when people apply for jobs, that they write up their resume as if they were texting a friend, and that has a negative impression on the people that in the HR who are making decisions about who gets hired. And it reminds me that when you go out socially, whether it was in a group of people or it includes young people, and sometimes even in family get-together, how many people don't pay attention to what you're doing or what you're saying is because within their hand is a little electronic gadget that they're talking to a friend of theirs, or they're looking something up, or they're just maybe playing a game. And it used to be kind of traditional among people, whether it would be a holiday or a birthday or some particular or a family festive occasion of some sort, that part of the reason they're getting together is kind of reinforcing your bond with your friends and your relatives, and that sometimes for young people it was a chance to get a better awareness of maybe where their family culture started, or how their family came here, or how the jobs that the uncles had, or the grandfather. In some instances, might be talking about people who weren't even alive any longer, and kind of connecting the next generation with past generations. And so when you get the distraction, and that's not just kids, it's also adults to do the same thing, that they get halfway through a conversation and they're whipping out something out of their pocket to read a text or some other message being sent to them by a friend of theirs or somebody else, that you have to kind of wonder how much of the knowledge, the oral history of a family stays within the family when the next generation isn't paying attention. And some of that goes back to the fact that the adults are setting an example by doing it themselves. But in any event, I don't think it's a good thing, and I think in a lot of instances it ends up that there's a loss of really knowing who those people are that are close to you, and sometimes even if they're not your family, if they're people in your life, that someday something that might have been discussed or been mentioned would have had some effect on what decision you made. You never heard it because you were too busy reading a text message from somebody else. I came across an article, and there's so much about the financial cliff that we're facing, but it says this came out of New York. It was a Globe staffer, and it says more than $150 million in additional funds will be required over the next 7 years to pay Social Security benefits under a reasonable, optimistic economic scenario. Representative J.J. Pickles, Democrat of Texas, chairman of the House Subcommittee on Social Security, said last week, "Short term, we need this money just to pay benefits. We have to be honest and face up to it. It's not small potatoes." Well, I guess $150 billion even in this day and age isn't. Pickles said in an interview with the Globe, "The need to raise an additional $20 to $22 billion a year in the emergency facing President Bipartisan Commission on Social Security, which meets in a special 3-day session beginning Thursday in Washington. The commission was formed to propose realistic reform to Social Security and put Social Security back on a sound financial footing." Now, I read that, and Social Security needs $150 billion. Well, that article appeared in the Boston Globe, only it wasn't President Obama who was in office at the time. And it wasn't this year, as we're talking about the problem with entitlements, which are, in its own way is Social Security. But it was in the Globe in November 1982, and the president was Ronald Reagan. And so the dilemma and the problems of 30 years ago are still with us. And they're with us partially because over the years since then, even though changes have been made to shrink the liability, as it were, for the future responsibility of Social Security, there are benefits that have been expanded in different ways that have caused the program to need more money, and that there have been other distractions made in terms of how the money is being invested. And there's also other people within the system who are now eligible that weren't eligible back then. In fact, there is now somewhere in several $billion a year now provided to families whose children who have been diagnosed with ADT, some of those other various youth types of things where they need medication. And what families now are getting is, since their child is considered disabled, they're now eligible for Social Security benefits, and it becomes part of the family income. This represents billions of dollars a year in benefits, and of course once you get on the gravy train, Nobody wants to get off, and so it not only has impact currently, but it has impact at a later date, because if these young people, when they get old enough to go to work, if they do go to work, the family no longer has their benefit, and that's where you get back again sometimes that, well, if you don't work and you get the money, and it's almost as good as if you did work and you don't have to work for the money, and the family could use the money, well, let's leave it as it is and we won't work. But then, of course, at some point, you're going to have to grow up and face the responsibility. But if you're going to wait that long, you may not look that attractive to an employer because you have no working experience. But anyway, this was 30 years ago. And again, that's points out how often the more things change, the more they remain the same. And so the issues that we had 30 years ago are facing us today again. I mentioned about electronic devices. Well, here's another one, and this is one that everybody should pay attention to. It talks about television affecting children. 2 separate recent studies have found that excessive amounts of television, even if it's merely in the background, can detrimentally affect the development of children's brains, to the point where they struggle to socially engage when they become older. And I think we see that with young people today when they're out socially with adults, and they're more interested in texting their friends and paying attention to what's being said or listen to what's being said. Add to this the already extensively documented impact that the television had on all of us, the power it has to literally alter our consciousness and shut down critical thinking. And there's no wonder that it was long dubbed the idiot box. Recent researchers from the University of North Carolina found that the background noise emitted from TV is so distracting and mesmerizing to children that it is impacting their ability to interact with other human beings and potentially slowing down thinking and language development. It is a clear warning signal to parents that if they are not watching TV, they ought to turn it off. It is also a reminder that parents should be avoiding screen time in infants under 2, he said. It's confusing for babies who are trying to get their language together to have indistinguishable voices in the background. Also noted, telling reporters that when parents bring their children to him, he can tell which toddlers are overexposed to TV. In a separate study, doctors at the Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health in London found that children born today will have watched a full year of television by the time they are 7 years old. The study also found that on average, children now spend more time watching TV than they do in school. The study recommends preventing children under 3 years from watching TV altogether, and says that all children should be limited to less than 2 hours of TV per day. Think about that, and think about your own home. In 2010, another study published found that doing analysis of over 1,000 children between the ages of 10 and 11, those who spend at least 2 hours a day in front of a TV are 60% more likely to have psychological problems than children who spend less or no time. The study also noted that even children taking part in physical activities but still watching TV are still 50% more likely to suffer problems. And anyway, that's the story about TV, and that's the electronic and virtual life. And we come to the last show of the year. I hope you all look forward to a healthy and happy New Year and an joyous holiday. And as someone who left a message on a telephone, a joyous day. May you all have joyous days every day. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next year when we go into 2013 and hope for the best.
Get out of the dock and into the zone.